Hello everyone, Derek Johnson with Tatango.com. If you're in the United States, there's a good chance recently that you, your friend, your family, or just somebody you know has received one of these spam messages or scam messages from UPS or FedEx. Now, it's not from UPS or FedEx, but it's pretending to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw up my phone over here, move over a little bit, so you can see this is what the message looks like. So it says, "Hello, James. Your FedEx package with tracking code, is waiting for you to set delivery preferences," and then they have a link there. Now, as a text message marketer, why are we talking about text message spam? Well, I'm thinking, and I have a hunch, and I'd like people to actually test this, brands, because I think it could be affecting click-through rates. So look at this link down here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you other brands that are either using short URLs or other link shorteners. And you can kind of see that even now, I'm in this industry, I've been doing it for like 12 years. I can tell that most likely this is not a FedEx link, but you got to think about the regular consumer. So I'm going to show you kind of what other brands are using, and then maybe why, for a test, it would be a good idea for most brands out there to, instead of using your link shortener, run a couple multivariant tests to see if using just your regular link will create better results, because maybe it's more trustworthy than some of these short URLs that you're going to see. So I'm going to run through it, and then you can make your own call, but I always recommend doing like A/B tests with both text messaging and MMS to see which one performs better, different variants of the message, and then this I think is going to be very important, is what type of link you use in the message. So let's quickly go through some of these and show you kind of what it looks like, and you can maybe then see how maybe your short link looks a little kind of, as people say, sketchy. So let's go here. This one is from Sonic. They do a great job of MMS, by the way. They're using a link shortener, and you can see it's smart.link, and then it has a lot of numbers and letters. Well, doesn't that kind of look similar to the link that was sent out that was spam? Maybe. Papa John's, so they're interesting. They have their own essentially URL shortener that is related to their brand, so it's not like a bit.ly or something. This one is pj.pizza. I don't know. I've shown this to some people, and they're like, it still looks pretty sketchy. Maybe not as sketchy as something called like OneLink or bit.ly, but pj.pizza could be a scammer. Let's look at Polo Factory. They're using another link shortener. This one is coming from a specific SMS provider, vbs.cm. That has nothing to do with Polo Factory. That seems pretty sketchy too. Again, if we wouldn't have these spam messages that are, pretending to be UPS and FedEx, and on the news they're telling don't click on, links in text messages, I don't think we would have a problem with, a bit.ly link or, whatever this is, pj.pizza. I think people would just click on it, no problem. But what I'm hearing in the news is that people are saying don't click on, text messages, or be very, very, concerned about, what you're clicking on in text messages. So I can see that a lot of consumers might be like, oh, I don't know, that's not Papa John's, URL. It says pizza, but, I don't want to take the risk. And remember, a lot of people are concerned about this right now. Let's look at Subway. Subway is a good example. They have their own URL, sbwy.us. It looks a little more legit than just some random, info kind of URL shortener, but still, I don't know. I'm in the industry. I'm in technology. I realize that's a URL shortener specific to Subway, or hopefully it is. Still, though, if I was a consumer, that looks very similar to the spam, link. Same with, I think this is American Eagle. They have their own ae.cr. At least that has AE in the URL, so it looks a little legit, but CR, that's, not a common, domain. So, that might be some foreign country. Now I'm kind of worrying. I'm like, oh, I don't know. They said, these usually attacks are happening from overseas, and I'm getting a little worried about this, clicking on this link. Bed Bath & Beyond, a little different approach. They're doing bedbath.mobi. Again, not really the website for Bed Bath & Beyond, but at least it says Bed Bath in the URL. But again, a lot of weird characters and stuff in here, so looks, again, sketchy. And my concern for SMS marketers right now is if something even looks sketchy or could be sketchy, that's going to be decreasing your click-through rates, which you don't want in text message marketing. Another one, JCPenney, they're using a URL shortener, spr.ly. Again, kind of the same thing. I know this is a URL shortener, but spr.ly, I've never heard that in relation to JCPenney. So now, my, kind of alarm bells in my head as a consumer start going up and going, that just doesn't seem right. Exactly the same as if you look at the FedEx message. That doesn't seem right because it doesn't say FedEx in the message. If it said fedex.com/something, I'd be like, most likely that's FedEx. Maybe in like m.fedex.com. Makes a lot more sense, but this one right here has nothing about FedEx in here, and neither does JCPenney. It's some spr.ly. Exact same kind of thing. I think brands have just got used to kind of using some of these shorteners, but maybe the consumer is not 100% on board or not, 100% understanding that because an SMS is limited in characters, we might be using short links. So I think my advice right now, and I don't have any actual evidence of lower click-through rates, but we're starting to tell our clients, hey, this is something you should be testing to see if you can get higher click-through rates if you're using your actual URL. Now, you might have to do some type of redirects. So let's say it was, Papa John's, papajohns.com/summer promo, and then it redirects to wherever it actually needs to go because you are limited to 160 characters in the text message. Now, that being said, as you can see here, and I've done a couple videos on this, there's a lot of stuff you don't need to include in messages. So let's just look, I think, Subway. So you do not have to include things like help in your mass messages. There's no reason to do that. The CTIA doesn't require that. The carriers don't require that. Stop is required in some of the messages. So, you can play around with those characters. There's some companies, again, this one has nothing in there. That's good. Let's see here. Let's find, I think it was... Okay, so, there is a little bit of space to, play around, especially with some like reply stop to cancel. You could shorten that a little bit to get some extra characters if you need. If you're really struggling, let me know. I love looking at an SMS and being like, I'm 180 characters. How can I shorten this? There are some requirements that are required by the carriers, but then some things that people are just putting in, I think, based on habit, or maybe somebody told them way back in the day that they had to include it. So I think you can find some extra characters to maybe put the full URL into the message and see if that gets a little higher click-through rate. Now, if you want to be kind of lazy and you don't want to, keep it to 160 characters, send an MMS message. MMS messages can send on Tatango at least up to 5,000 characters. You can send whatever URL you want if you have 5,000 characters. So that might be another opportunity is, for a few messages to test out if you get better click-through rates, with a actual URL that's not shortened, or you're not using a shortened service like Bitly. That might be, easy to do, is just send an MMS message, because then you can send as many characters as you want, no matter what size, your link is, you're all good. So anyways, just wanted to kind of give you this kind of analysis. I'm hearing a lot of people really concerned about this, UPS, FedEx, text message, scam, don't click on the links. And I think that could be impacting click-through rates for regular brands. So anything you can do to make the customer feel a little more, confident that they're making the right decision by clicking on that link and it's not a scam, I think is only going to help your click-through rates. Anyway, my name is Derek Johnson with Tatango.com. I guarantee people are going to have opinions about this video. So if you do, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear whether you think it's going to work. And also, if you do try this, definitely post what the results are. If you do get a higher click-through rate or even a lower click-through rate, definitely post, because I'd love to hear you guys' feedback about what is actually happening out there. Again, thanks everyone for watching, and good luck raising those click-through rates.